Curses, it is said, can be placed upon all manner of objects. It is believed when someone uses or even touches these malevolent artifacts, they can cause irreparable damage to them and even the entire world. If these stories are to be believed, cursed objects do exist and can be deadly. In 79 AD, an eruption in southern Italy would tremble through time, forever staining the pages of history, a devastating incident that entombed at least 1,100 people. This was the volcanic eruption of Vesuvius, and the place that it buried was Pompeii, a Roman city home to up to 20,000 inhabitants at the time of its destruction. For centuries, the city slept under pumice and ash, perfectly preserved, awaiting rediscovery. When it was uncovered by archaeologists throughout the 19th century and later in the 1920s, the well-preserved corpses of many of the volcano's victims were found, lying on the ground, face down, shielding their faces with their hands at the moment of their death. Today, the ancient and ruinous site is one of the most visited in Italy, usually attracting some 2.5 million visitors each year. An illicit but surprisingly common practice for many of these visitors is the pilfering of fragments, chippings of stone and pieces of ancient mosaic from the devastated city. In 2005, a Canadian tourist known only as Nicole engaged in such thievery, snatching 2 mosaic tiles, fragments of a vase, and shards of ceramics from Pompeii, souvenirs of her trip, and pieces of history that couldn't be bought. In the course of the next 15 years, however, Nicole suffered such hardship that she regretted ever having taken the artifacts. The fragments of the city, she claims, were cursed. 15 years after her trip, a travel agency in Pompeii received a package, postmarked to Canada but with no return address from Nicole, containing the stolen artifacts and a letter of apology. The travel agency forwarded the package to the local police. In her letter, Nicole described how bad luck had plagued herself and her family ever since she stole the fragments. "I am now 36, she wrote in the letter, and have had breast cancer twice, the last time resulting in a double mastectomy. Financial woes have also haunted her family since 2005, preventing them from getting ahead, all of which she blames on the objects she took, which she considers to have so much negative energy because of their link to that land of destruction. In returning the relics to Pompeii and apologizing for her careless act, she hoped to appease the gods and lift the curse that they had placed on her. I don't want to pass this curse onto my family, she wrote in her letter. Whilst Nicole's story might sound overly dramatic, she is far from alone in her claims. Shortly after Nicole's package arrived, the police received another, containing yet more stolen artifacts and a similar letter of apology. May their souls rest in peace, wrote the couple who had returned the items. Massimo Ossana, the archaeological superintendent of Pompeii, has reported that he has received hundreds of similar packages in recent years, from all around the world, containing items taken from the archaeological site. Invariably, the letters which accompany the objects speak of terrible bad luck brought about by possession of the artifacts. One such letter from South America reported that a stolen piece of stone had brought the thief and their family trauma after trauma. If great acts of devastation have the ability to scar the fabric of the place that they occur, then Pompeii must be scarred indeed, so much so that the very stones of the ancient city are cursed, and that any who remove them are destined to suffer the wrath of the gods. For hundreds of years, the manuscript of the Orphan story has stood still. The reason for its neglect, it is claimed, is a deadly curse. Contrary to what you might expect, the book is not about anything overtly sinister. It was written at the beginning of the 17th century by Martin de Leon y Cardenas, a Spanish Augustinian friar born near Malaga. The story centers on the adventure of a 14-year-old Spaniard who traverses the Spanish Empire during its golden age. From the high society of Peru to the sacking of Cadiz, the book serves as a vivid and honest portrayal of the times, and as such is considered to have great academic value. Many have been attracted to it over the years, but it has never been published until recently. Many believe this to be because of a curse. When the manuscript caught the attention of the Peruvian academic Belinda Palacios, she was given a warning by the teacher who sent it to her. According to Palacios, they said, "I must warn you, the novel is cursed. You must know the people who worked on it before have died." Palacios dismissed the warning as a joke, but then received a further warning from Professor Raquel Shang Rodriguez, a distinguished scholar at the City College of New York. She warned that the manuscript was known to be bewitched, and that she had heard of at least 2 renowned academics who are thought to have fallen prey to its curse. It is alleged that Antonio Rodriguez Monino and the Spanish professor William C. Bryant both perished whilst working on the manuscript. In addition to this, Palacios herself has stated that amongst those who died of the curse, one succumbed to a strange disease, and another met their end in a car accident. These are of course the known deaths associated with the Orphan story. It is impossible to know if there are others who have been afflicted by its curse over the centuries. After such warnings, Palacios began her work with trepidation. So shaken by the stories she had heard, she even instructed her friends to burn the manuscript if the curse revealed itself to be real, causing something terrible to happen to her. No one else would be able to succumb to the temptation of pursuing such deadly work. Happily, it seems that the curse may now be finally broken. In 2018, thanks to Palacios' efforts, the book was published for the first time in history. In the 1890s, the Welsh city of Swansea decided to rebuild their St. Mary's Church. A central place of worship, it was an important task, and several architects were invited to submit their proposals for the new building. The job went to the acclaimed architect, Sir Arthur Blomfield, a decision which left another, a competing local designer, angered. He had wanted the job for himself and took the rejection badly. Some years later, he designed a red brick office building across the road from St. Mary's and gave it a distinctive feature, a horned carving of Satan facing the church. Still angry at his rejection, the man cursed the church, prophesying that his devil would remain laughing when your church is destroyed and burnt to the ground. Years later, St. Mary's Church suffered extensive damage when it was bombed in February 1941. On the other side of the road, the devil looked on, grinning and free of damage. Imbued with his creator's curse, he watched the church burn to the ground. Eventually, the church was rebuilt and the vengeful designer's building torn down and replaced with a shopping centre. Somewhere along the way, however, the Swansea Devil went missing. He was later discovered elsewhere, left to rot in a garage. Anxious that he be returned to his rightful place, watching eerily over the now restored St. Mary's Church, he was repaired and placed as close to his original location inside the shopping centre as possible. There was notable religious objection to the horned figure's reinstallation. Ultimately, however, public favour for the Swansea Devil was stronger, with him becoming affectionately known as Old Nick. As of 2019, his home is the city's museum. There he sits behind glass, with local people whispering that this is more for our protection than it is for his. The Patek Philippe Henry Graves Supercomplication is considered to be the most beautiful watch in the world. It is also one of, if not the most, complicated mechanical pocket watches ever created, having taken 8 years, 3 of which were dedicated to research alone to make, after it was commissioned by the banker Henry Graves Jr. in 1925. The watch has 24 complications, 24 functions beyond the display of time, including a perpetual calendar, the phases of the moon, a record of sunrise and sunset times, and a celestial map including 500 golden stars of New York City as seen from the window of Graves' Fifth Avenue apartment. Most remarkably, the functions before the age of computers were performed mechanically. And so the Supercomplication is a timepiece of superlatives. It is one of the most beautiful watches in the world, one of the most complicated, and after being sold in 2016 for a record 23 million Swiss francs, the then equivalent of $24 million US, certainly one of the most expensive. It is also, if these things are to be believed, one of the most cursed watches ever to exist. Just 7 months after Graves took possession of the pocket watch, his best friend passed away, and a short time after that his youngest son, George, was killed in a car crash, his eldest son, Harry, having also tragically lost his life a few years earlier in a similar accident. Years later, when Graves was in his 60s, he took his daughter out boating one afternoon. He is said to have been in a dour mood. When his daughter questioned him about it, Graves supposedly pulled a large watch out from his pocket, before lamenting how such things bring one nothing but trouble. If the story is to be believed, Graves, so disturbed by the watch and the ill fortune it had brought him, very almost threw it into the lake there and then, only to be stopped by his daughter. After Graves' death, the watch stayed in the family for a time, before being sold on the 2nd of December 1999 for a colossal $11 million. It was purchased by a member of the Qatari royal family. The Sheikh owned the timepiece for many years, before deciding to sell it, with Sotheby's announcing on the 10th of July 2014 that it would be put up for auction later in the year, on the 11th of November. Just 2 days before the auction date, however, the Sheikh died, aged only 48, after suffering complications from a heart condition. The auction still went ahead, being purchased by an anonymous buyer for a record sum, and so the location of the infamous Supercomplication is now unknown. On the night of the 16th of April 1939, the lights went out across Cairo, Egypt, 5 minutes before Tutankhamun's trumpets were scheduled to be played after thousands of years of silence. By candlelight, James Tappan of the British Royal Hussars Regiment played the ancient king's trumpets on the radio for the BBC. 150 million people heard the sound. Some believe the trumpets had a military purpose in ancient Egypt. Whatever the truth, the instruments seem to have one now, for it is said that the trumpets soon brought the world the deadliest conflict it had ever endured, when 5 months later Britain declared war against Germany. The melody of the trumpets would not be broadcast again. However, Egyptologist Hala Hassan believes that the magical powers of the trumpets extended beyond that great conflict. In 1967, before the Six-Day War that engrossed the Middle East, it is said that the trumpets were played again. Then, in 1990, a student who was conducting research on Tutankhamun's artifacts blew the trumpets. Soon after they sounded, the Gulf War erupted. Most recently, a week before the revolution broke out in Egypt in 2011, during a documenting and photographing process, one of the staff at the Egyptian museum where the trumpets are housed blew the instrument. These incidents have sparked a legend that the boy king used these trumpets to herald the beginning of a new war. With depictions of powerful Egyptian deities carved onto the instruments, this may very well have been the case. It is also an eerie parallel to consider that it was a British soldier who sounded the trumpets in 1939, much in the same way as an Egyptian soldier might have done before their country went to war as well. Whether or not these instruments are actually imbued with a curse, with the power to ignite war, is of course up for debate. But after more than one incident connected to their playing, pure coincidence starts to look less like reality. As the Egyptologist and curator of the Tutankhamun collection at the Egyptian Museum, Hala Hassan, has confidently said, whenever someone blows into it, a war occurs. Thank you for watching. Just a quick word before we finish regarding my documentary In Search of the Dead's recent nomination for a Best Paranormal Documentary Film Award. The award is hosted by Higgy Pop as part of their annual Paranormal Entertainment Awards ceremony, and I would love it if you could show support by clicking the link below and submitting a vote. Also included in the contest are awards for the Best YouTube Ghost Hunting Series and Best Paranormal Blogger, for which the wonderful Amy's Crypt has been nominated, so why not show Amy some love too by voting using the link below. Thank you again for watching. Until next time.